Hello, everybody. I am doing a IG Live with someone I've been a huge fan of for a very long time, Professor Tim, who I've just invited to join. Tim, and he's here already. My goodness. Hi, Tim.
Hi there, Julia. Lovely to meet you.
Very, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'm on time for once, and my fingers found the right button, so that's great.
You're perfectly on time. And I was just introducing you as a professor at King's, a best-selling author of Spoon-Fed and other books, and the co-founder of Zoe. So you've been very, very busy, and very busy in COVID as well.
Far too busy, yes, far too busy. But
So, I mean, I've followed you for a long time, and so it feels a real honor to be on the call with you. So thank you for joining me. I first of all wanted to talk about Zoe and kind of personalized nutrition and how you kind of got to that from your work with identical twins. I'm a twin, by the way, but not to an identical twin. But do you want to talk about that, how you kind of got to Zoe, looking at twins who everything was identical apart from how they died, apart from their health?
yeah, so I've been studying twins for 30 years now, and throughout my career, and I've always been interested in different bits of twinness and comparing identicals with non-identicals, nature v nurture. And the latter, the first 15 years was, oh, how marvelous, everything's so similar and genetic. And actually the last 15 years is starting to think, well, there's something a bit weird going on here. Identical twins are often different. One happy, one sad, one overweight, one skinny, one religious, one atheist, one got cancer, one not. And so trying to work out, well, from these perfect genetic clones, what could it be about them that makes them more susceptible, one more susceptible to disease than the other? If you can find that, you find the key to many diseases. That was the whole idea. And so I first went after something called epigenetics, which are the
turns on and off your genes.
Yeah, so like a dimmer switch on your genes that explained a little bit of it, and was quite exciting initially, but the technology wasn't there, and the differences were too small to really explain most of common disease. So then I went to a microbiome talk about 13 years ago and heard someone talk about it. So, gosh, this sounds fascinating.
Because that was the early days. That was, microbiome. I mean, I think a lot of people know about it now, but 10 years ago, it was a really kind of unknown. It was the dark ages, really. Nobody knew very much or how influential it could be.
Yeah, and everyone thought just discussing it, you were a bit of a quack, and shouldn't be taken seriously. So particularly in this country, in the UK, where there was a lot of skepticism, and that's why there's so little research or funding. And I, from that moment, I said, I'm always curious to do the first twin study of something. And I think just running it in twins, identicals, non-identicals, tells you so much about something. And so that's what we did with a group in Cornell in the US. And we found that actually genes were only a very small influence on the gut microbes, that even identical twins had very different microbes. So that was, for me, the aha moment, knowing that most of us have a unique set of gut microbes, and that could explain this huge differences between all of us in how we respond to things, whether it's life events, whether it's viruses, whether it's diet. And so that got me onto this idea, and the technology just got better and better. We can delve into deeper and deeper into the microbiome now, using the methods that I was using for genetics. So in a way, I was able to transfer my skills and those of my department that had done great things in gene finding and other stuff into really dissecting the gut microbes, which is actually even more complicated than human genetics. Hard to believe that anything could be, but
the millions of microbiota. Though.
Yeah, science never gets easier. I think that's the understanding, and nor does understanding the human body and health. Its complexity is is really, really important to understand. And that's why, we need new technologies to grapple with its complexity. So the microbiome, the fact that it's unique in everybody, and the fact that it interacts with just about everything that goes into our stomachs, including all kinds of tablets, and also is influenced by our outside environment, even things like stress, is crucial to this understanding. And that's sort of where we got to. And in a way, I wanted to do more on the microbiome. And then the obvious thing to do is to say, well, let's see how it interacts with food.
Yeah.
And if we can get those two things together, we can modify the microbiome with food, and we can also understand which foods to eat by understanding our microbiome, a two-way process. And luckily, everything has fallen into place. I've been very lucky. The technology is just right.
Must have been astonishing to find out how personalised our response to food is. That must have been, a sort of miraculous discovery, because I mean, it wasn't even a thing, like you've talked about a lot before, it's one size fits all. It's calorie counting, or don't eat fats, or don't eat carbs, or even don't eat processed food. But it must have been, was it a eureka, not a moment, but a kind of period of time as you were seeing your results and recognizing the influence of how individual we are, how personal, how, me and my twin, we would have very different responses to fat, sugar, sweet, all of the different things.
Yes, I mean, I think it was the size of the difference that really took our breath away, because just, casting my back to that study, we had 1,000 people, mostly twins, and we
What year was this?
We did this about 3.5 years ago.
Recent.
Yeah, I mean, this is super fast, doing the study, raising the money for the company, getting a product out there. It's happened in warp speed,
Really?
10 times faster than it could have happened in an academic university environment. And that's been another revelation for me is what you can do with highly committed people, unconstrained by bureaucracy and academia, and with the right teams. And so you have the right people. So we did all this incredibly fast, and we completed the world's largest intervention study in 9 months.
Unbelievable.
And we gave 1,000 people, mainly twins, identical meals. So they all had identical muffins, identical milkshakes, and we took bloods every hour throughout the day, and all kinds of other measurements. And that was the basis that we measured everything we could. And we saw that these are all normal people. They weren't diseased people, weren't people with diabetes,
no.
Just, you or me, and it was a range of ages, 30 to 60. And there was a 10-fold difference in how everyone responded to sugars or fats or inflammation. And that really was the bit. So, well, if it's that big, we've suddenly got something to work with, that we can predict how different people are going to respond to any food, knowing that those differences are so huge, and that is going to have a huge effect on the body and the brain.
Must have been incredible. I mean, you do work for decades, and as you say, in academia and in the NHS, and then in 3 years, it's like a revolution. I mean, must be incredibly exciting, but also a tiny bit scary. But I mean, I've been a Zoe tester.
Oh yeah.
And because I signed up for it over a year ago, and a lot of people who were doing the call today, and a lot of people watching, I think, have signed up for it and are very excited about the Zoe product. And I had the glucose monitor, I did the muffins, I had all the tests, and now I've had all the results. And I think it has really changed my attitude to food. I mean, I haven't got an eating disorder. I'm not really overweight. But before, I used to eat in very kind of particular ways, because I'd give myself a treat. It's Friday, I'm going to have a choc ice. which is fair enough. I'm probably always going to give myself a chalk ice on a Friday, but you know, I would do it according to how I felt, as opposed to now I do it for the well-being of my body. Like, what does my body want? What does my microbiome want? It probably doesn't want, you know, like all the films, like when you're unhappy, you eat 3 jars of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and that's, or drink 2 sort of cases of whiskey, whatever they do, as that is the natural thing to do when you're unhappy. And somehow the Zoe product has shifted. I'm 62, my 62-year-old mindset to, well, actually, if I'm not in a very good mood, maybe I can choose to do something that's actually going to keep my mood balanced rather than crash it.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly really what, you know, me writing my books and trying to put this research into action is all about. It's just making people think about food in a completely different way from the idea of calories and fuel and, you know, each for a moment and it purely at yourself. And it's like, you know, suddenly you're rather altruistic. You're thinking of yourself as this whole, you know, community of trillions of people.
Yeah.
That you're saying, okay, well, you know, I might want that, but what about the other guys? You know, they're going to be very unhappy. They'll be very unhappy, and they're going to give me a hard time tomorrow. You know, and I think suddenly thinking in a more
there's another voice. There's my microbiome
sort of
voice.
Yeah, a sort of Buddhist way of eating is saying, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you wouldn't, you know, spread Haagen-Dazs all over your garden when you've got just planting new plants in there. So, you know, I think it does balance it out. But the rule is that if you can get your gut microbes in a good state,
mine are really good, by the way. I'm 88%.
Very impressive. That's above my latest one. I'm doing it again, so I'm seeing if I can beat you. But I'm very jealous.
Not that you're competitive or anything.
No,
but,
not at all.
But I don't process fat well, and
No.
so that's my bad thing, which is really annoying. But anyway, but what to link it to the microbiome and our moods. Is it 90% of our serotonin, which is our kind of good feel factor neurotransmitter, comes from our microbiome?
On average, yes. I mean, I think they haven't done enough studies to work out how much differences there are. People, again, this is old-fashioned research based on averages rather than individuals. And I think that's you know, in the new world, we have enough people to actually test this properly. But broadly, our gut microbes produce most of the serotonin, and particularly at night when we're not eating and we can't, you know, absorb any from food or break it down. So I think that alone was quite a big revelation in thinking about our gut microbes in a new way, particularly for mental health. That one of these key neurochemicals that, you know, is probably central to so many different chemical processes in the brain can actually be altered by altering your gut microbes. And lots of mouse studies have transferred, you know, done poo transplants in mice that can change their mood, make them more or less anxious. And, you know, this is really incredible that, you know, making anxiety and depression a bit like an infectious disease, if you like, at one level. That that's been a real eye-opener. Plus, I guess all the latest research on showing how in clinical trials, changing people's diets can be as effective as antidepressants for
I saw
mild
that, the SMILE study, which, if you eat a Mediterranean diet, those that are on the study, I mean, it wasn't a huge study, so it needs to kind of be further developed.
And the effects
a
are
third
quite
of them
large,
had remission.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the effects are very dramatic, and that's why I think a lot of people didn't take it at face value. So the results are perhaps too good to be true, because, you know, it gave such a dramatic result. But I think that, you know, it's not alone in these studies, and so hopefully it will allow people to actually, rather than just, you know, spending billions on yet another trivial improvement in an antidepressant, we could actually spend just a few million and work out how people can improve their diet and to improve their mood. But I think it's now the logical thing to think about when you think about depression, or advising someone, because it may be hard to think yourself, but if you're advising someone with mild to moderate depression, so the first thing, change your diet. Eating junk foods, which is the normal reaction, as you said, to external events,
misery
or
and heartache.
it could be exactly the wrong thing, and actually plunge you further into that state. And if someone else is around to give you a good diet and balance it out, I think it's important. I mean, I did lots of experiments in the last few years on myself, and one of them was eating these Zoe muffins, only the Zoe muffins, for 24 hours. Now, you've eaten them, right? They're not like a fabulous treat. They're not like a Magnum, There's
no.
Right? But you do it for science. And but I was having to eat these every 4 hours, and I looked at my blood sugar, and it was going up and down like a yo-yo.
Crazy.
Really massive changes with massive dips after it, and I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't do any work, and I found my brain was all over the place, and I've never really felt
you were sort of
mentally so unwell. And it's an interesting experiment that I think people should do, is to say, well, in these peaks and these troughs, which is generating not only the excess sugar and insulin, but also we know things like inflammation. So it's actually stressing the whole system, and it's surprising what effect that had, despite me not actually eating more calories than I should have had on my body.
Can I come in? Because from what I saw from the research that I saw on the Zoe website, and by the way, everyone is really excited. They can't wait to get their Zoe box. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But what I know from the polyvagal system, which is our emotional system, which responds, it seeks homeostasis. So the sympathetic goes up in response to a demand, and the parasympathetic goes down and regulates our system. And the polyvagal system, it seeks homeostasis through the vagus nerve, which is the sort of balancing nerve. And it can have the dorsal, where you're flattened and kind of frozen, or you can have the sympathetic, where you're on alert, very heightened when you're anxious and kind of in gear 4. And what I saw from your research is that the gut-brain axis, from the microbiome to the brain, it hits the vagus nerve so that it switches it off from the vagus nerve to the sympathetic, to the heightened anxiety state. So it actually, if you think of your emotional system as gears, from the kind of second gear, it puts you, the food puts you into 4th gear, where then everything is switched off. Because when you're in 4th gear, you're there to fight or fly or freeze. So your digestion doesn't work properly. You're not there to think and process information and make decisions. You're there to see if you're going to stab him or run, and how to kind of beat the tiger. So your memory doesn't work at all. You're literally there with all of your senses to fight or flee. And so of course it affects your mood, it affects your digestion, and it affects your health, your immune system, because you're inflamed, because you're on high alert. And so if you can imagine, if you're doing that constantly to your system, your vagus nerve then is put through the ringer permanently. And of course, our brains are prediction machines. We like habit, and we like knowing what's going to happen. And so it becomes a pathway that our brain expects us to be constantly on alert and to eat the sugar or eat the processed food that sends us that way. And so it feels an incredibly difficult pathway to step off. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely, yes. And there's even it's still a theory, but it's been shown in some insects that microbes themselves actually choose, rather than, you're talking about our own brains, our own sort of inner self saying, give me more chalk ices because, that's what I need. Your microbes might say, actually, there's a species of microbe that only likes chalk ice and is saying, managing to mutate to send a signal to the brain saying, give me more chalk ice and less of that spinach stuff, because I want to take over the
The
gut. And I think,
survival of the fittest of that microbiota, of Fred,
yeah,
not Freddie, but whoever it is.
yeah. So we know that happens to some extent. We don't know how important it is in humans, but in insects, definitely, there've been studies showing that they can,
Do insects have a
modify.
microbiota? They're so bloody small. How can they have a microbiota?
Everything living has a microbiota. It is amazing, yes, and they haven't. And there's, and you got there's. It's like Russian dolls within the bacteria. Then you've got minute viruses feeding off them in their own little ecosystem, and even insects have parasites in them, and in the parasites are other microbes. So it's again, we can hardly comprehend how complex this whole thing is. But I think what is clear is that I did this muffin test, which is these are standard muffins that we do to test the standard amounts of fat and sugar, and everybody who does the Zoe test is exactly the same muffins as everyone else in the world, and so that's why we're getting this amazing database. But how much it goes up and down depends a bit on yourself, but also on how healthy your gut microbes are. So if, like you've got really good, healthy, diverse microbes, you're going to get less up and down when you just go for 24 hours binging on chalk ices. Whereas someone who had a poorer diet and hadn't been eating much fiber and had been deprived, lots of junk food, is going to very rapidly go downhill quicker. And I think that's really important. So we can protect ourselves a bit against these mood changes, these metabolic changes, by, when we are thinking about it preventively, improving our diets. And I think that's the improving lesson. It's not just the acute moment. It's you can protect yourself having a robust system, which is harder to shift. Whereas, junk people on junk food
It's
diets
preventative
are real trouble.
medicine in a way, is what you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's protection. It's so when you do get an infection or you do have a crisis, your gut microbiome will be more robust in dealing with it than if I had eaten processed foods. But also, if I started eating processed foods, I imagine I could downward spiral my microbiome as quickly as I could make it positive. So I could probably do it quite a lot of harm in a month. You can change it in a month, can't you? 3 to 4 weeks. So I could do harm to it, couldn't I? I mean, depending on my diet, right? It's plastic. It's changing.
it's probably quicker than that. It's actually, and sadly, it's easier to get bad microbes and make your watch worse quicker than it is to improve your gut microbiome. So in my previous book, The Diet Myth, I described how gave my son the McDonald's diet for 10 days.
Your poor son. That's so awful.
My poor, I know, what a horrible father. But
yeah.
he was a poor student, and so I was paying for his meals, and he did get some credits at university from him, from all his friends. But he lost a lot of his microbes in that time, and he'd already started to lose them at day 4. He did it for 10 days, and then many of them never came back.
Oh my goodness.
So it depends on, people who really have a really poor diet. He was only eating McDonald's chicken nuggets or burger, Coke and fries, and virtually no fiber at all. And so he killed off a lot of his microbes. And I think that's the problem, that people who do that are then really susceptible to external events, and then will go into a cascade of anxiety and depression, and very hard to get them out of it. Much easier if you've still got some reserve and you can catch it in time, and and start to mitigate. I mean, it's not the cure for everything, because I'm not saying that diet cures all depression, but nor do antidepressant tablets. And I think
they don't cure it at all. Sarah Mosley is saying, this is so me, Julia. I've had immense problems with high cortisol levels, fight, flight, over many years. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with microscopic colitis, which isn't much fun. So of course it isn't fun. I'm so sorry, Sarah. Would you say, Tim, that is connected? I mean, you're not, maybe you can't say.
Well, I can't say about individual cases, but
Yeah.
I think people have to, what we found also, another thing we found based on this data, amazingly, was that 1 in 4 people have very profound sugar dips. So if they have a nice, traditional British breakfast, which is toast or muesli or cornflakes or even porridge, 1 in 4 will get a real big sugar dip at about 3 hours later. And those people, they lose energy, they don't feel good, and they actually, over the day, feel hungrier, and they're getting more inflammation. So there are some people that do react like that to high carb foods and wouldn't know about it unless they start thinking about it, doing some experiments on themselves, or have access to something like the Zoe kit. So this is very new science. In the past, we've just said, oh, well, these people, have got some other problem, or it's psychological. I never used to believe people. I mean, I'm one of the medical skeptics, particularly females who said, I feel faint at 10:30 in the morning. I need a McVitie's biscuit, and it's actually true. They probably did, although, they should have had yogurt, not a McVitie's biscuit. So yeah, I think we're discovering all kinds of things about ourselves that are self-induced in a way that we haven't been aware of, just because we've been eating the wrong breakfast, or haven't really listened to our bodies, and just assume that everyone's the same. We're all so different in the way we react to foods.
I mean, that is the big message, isn't it? That it's very personalised. And the thing that Zoe does, that I got from using the kit and my glucose monitor and, having the test and everything, is that now I have a list of all the individual foods that are kind of greenlit, that are good for me, and ones that aren't so good for me. But do you want to say, Cosway is saying, what is the best way to protect the microbiome when, for instance, taking antibiotics? But there are basics that you tell people, aren't they, about kimchi, about 30 veg and fruit a week. Do you want to say the basics for people who are listening, about if you had, if you can't get the Zoe kit yet, but you will be able to get it, what are the kind of guidelines?
I mean, all the details are in my book as well, so you can you can get the baby. But the 30-second version of that is the
you can give a bit longer than 30 seconds.
Well, it's four basic rules about feeding a gut microbiome, and the first one is plant diversity, and trying to eat around 30 different types of plant a week, and that includes nuts, herbs, seeds, and spices. So it's not as hard as you think. You just got to always be looking for something new to nurture your gut like it's your garden. And I think that's the first rule. Lots of plants on your plate. Doesn't really matter what else you've got, as long as you've got those plants. I don't mind if you have meat or fish or whatever it is, but generally they take up too much room to put the plants on there. The second is pick plants that are high in polyphenols, which are colourful, often slightly bitter, astringent, berries, vegetables, nuts, seeds, include things like dark chocolate, include things like coffee. Coffee is very good for you and is actually high in fibre. And even decaf is also good for you. It's not just the caffeine. So it's just the fact that it's a fermented plant. Then you've got, as well as dark chocolate, you've got red wine as treats, but only up to probably one glass. And then the fermented foods is the third point. Have a regular fermented food diet, small shot every day. Doesn't matter really what it is, but vary it if you can. Things like kefir, which is fermented milk, or kombucha, or some artisan cheeses have the most range of microbes, but also kimchi, which is Korean sauerkraut, is great as well. And just make them part of your diet, which isn't traditionally part of the British diet. And then finally, avoid snacking and ultra-processed foods, which are bad for your gut microbiome. And that includes things like artificial sweeteners, emulsifiers in foods, etc. And follow those 4 rules, and everyone will improve their gut microbes.
That's really, really helpful. And Cosway is saying, does the research look at anxiety as well as depression? And it does, doesn't it? There's that one that where if you're anxious and you've got your tummy in knots, that is affected by your microbiome.
Yeah, actually, the most consistent results with the microbiome and so these mood and mental disorders are with anxiety and depression. So people who often suffer both have the strongest links between the gut and the brain. So we find it in microbiome terms quite hard to separate those two, and I think they are on this spectrum of disorder. So I think everything we're talking about depression is exactly right for anxiety, and I think we're just scraping the surface of what we're going to find. I'm hopeful in the future we're going to be able to prescribe, not only general gut-friendly foods, but particular foods that are going to elevate particular microbes that are going to produce then the right chemicals to rebalance the brain.
And everyone is really interested about their own particular relationship, and they're all kind of asking each other questions and about what they do with each other, and eating carbs and bread makes them foggy, or some people had eaten porridge and actually now they eat quinoa as well. Tell us about Zoe and how long the wait is. I mean, you've done, I didn't realize it was 3 years. I mean, that is phenomenal, the speed of it. Congratulations. But for those, I think there's 200,000 people waiting, no?
Sadly, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not sad.
It's not a secret. It's not a secret anymore. So that if it was a secret, I could just say only people on this listening could get the kit. But because I think partly the success of knowing about Zoe and what they did in COVID, where we had 4 million people on the app, people have heard about this, heard about me talking about it, read my books. So we do have 200,000 people. We don't think all of them are going to buy it. Many of them just signed up. I think some of them thought it was completely free and I'd be paying for it all. So I think we are ramping up the scale of things. So I think we'll get through that wait list by the end of the year. And so it shouldn't be too long. So people should, if they haven't already, they should sign up, and we will meet the demand. If people say they want it, we will get it to them. And I think it's just the starting point. That just really shows you, as it's shown you, a new way of looking at food and understanding your body, and that what the results you got are going to be very different for everyone else. And I think everyone starts to realize, that way I can redesign what I eat. And
the combining of foods I've never really thought of before. That, if I don't have a piece of toast, but if I have a piece of toast with an avocado and an egg and some olive oil, that
you can make it all right.
I can make it all right. Actually, it's making it taste better anyway. The last kind of thought I had is I'm working on a project that's young people's mental health and adolescence, which has deteriorated. I mean, they think it's 300% worse since COVID. And I was thinking about how being at home and in lockdown and not, we're social beings, we co-regulate by being with our peers. And for adolescents in particular, at that kind of developmental time of their life, not having the kind of debrief in Starbucks after school, or the kind of chat that you have going into the classroom, and all of that connection, and how that has actually changed the pathways in particularly young girls, adolescent girls. But I was also thinking that for Zoe, we haven't even begun to think about the diet. School food is one whole thing, and what's taught in schools, but also about their mental health for young people, that this is a kind of route that we need to be looking into.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, this is a crucial time in life, and I think one thing that has been overlooked is, how bad everything was said about diet in the, in the UK and the US is even worse for teenagers.
Exactly.
And it's very common to go, a week without having any fiber, or with eating disorders, and actually trying, going the other way as well. So both of them harm the gut microbes. So education, I think, is absolutely crucial here. We, in the COVID,
and preventative medicine. I mean, if you have an anxiety disorder or depressive disorder at 14, you can actually, with preventative medicine, if you have an early intervention, that could be a social prescription as well as a kind of talking treatment or CBT or whatever. You can put them back on the path that they're not then depressed or anxious at 25. But if you don't get that early intervention, then the chances that they will be is like 80%.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so if go on, Tim. Yeah.
But teaching how much lifestyle is important to
exactly.
this, the importance of socializing, exercise, sleep, and your choice of food is so crucial to, regaining that balance and not going down a slippery slope, I think is really important. But it's also important for other family members to realize that as well. People will have sons and daughters, going through these difficult periods. And I think being able to advise them properly that, this is one problem in the body, but the rest of the body needs support, and then it can, it's going to be much more resilient. But we found the COVID pandemic really quite shocking in that about a third of people change their diet, for the better, and a third of people change it for the worst. And there's never been such a major shift in people's habits and lifestyle since the Second World War. So I think this is a really pivotal moment. Some people actually did get better, so we mustn't forget that actually some people had a
third of families
pandemic
thrived. That's the research that I saw mentally. A third of families said it was really good for us. We're flourished. It gave us time together. We're kind of looking at our lives. So many positives.
But I think they go together. Those people are probably the same ones that actually improved their diets. And they all cooked as a family, had family meals, exercised, etc. So, I think it's a real huge lesson for us. Never had such a mass experiment before to show how important all these things are. And it's not about tablets and pills. It's really about this collective knowledge about how we can improve our mood and happiness.
And just the last thing about with children and young people, of course, is that they learn by observing the adults around them. So we model it. That is the way they learn, not from what we say. So there's no point telling young people to eat a diverse mix of vegetables and fruits and plant-based foods and take exercise if you're sitting at home and eating a McDonald's every night.
No, but there's a belief that if you can get to kids in primary school, educate them about food.
Oh, they'll educate the parents.
They will educate the parents, and you give them gold stars if they've got their parents to change their habits. There's some quite good data on that. So I think it's a pity we have a government that's so anti education and changing our eating habits. But hopefully in the future we might get one, and that's probably the way it's going to happen is. Get it into primary schools, change the way that the kids eat, get them to understand food again, get them to cook, and they'll teach the forgotten generation of their parents. I think that's probably the way around it. But the more people that know about it, the more we talk about it. All of us, kefir didn't. When I wrote my book, The Diet Myth, no one had ever heard of kefir. 1 in 20 doctors had heard of it. Now, if you live in a major city, it's in every shop. Yeah, so. Things can happen quickly in the food world, and that's one ray of sunshine. I think optimism that the word of mouth can really change it, and it has buying power as well. So, if for depression, you reach for the kefir rather than the tablet, as the first sign, that would be a pretty good message to spread.
It would. Tim, you're doing amazing things. I really doff my cap at you, and thank you for this wonderful conversation. There's so many people who are really agreeing with you and thrilled with what you're doing, and keep going. You're changing the world.
Yeah, well, that's the plan. So hopefully it'll be good. So yeah, I've had a few comments. So go to joinzoe.com if you want to join that wait list. We're only in the UK and the US at the moment.
Are you in Ireland?
So,
Someone's asked about Ireland and Europe.
not yet. No, it's we have to each time get the food database and convert it. It's a tough. But if you know someone in the UK or the US, you can get the kits sent there and do it through them. That's not a problem. But yeah, we're hoping to expand soon, and the next phase is take over the world. So and it's the nice thing is it's getting better all the time. So the more people that sign up, the more data we get, the better the advice we can feed it back. So it's one big citizen science project, and we're all learning every day, and that's the exciting thing about it. And I think
it is incredibly exciting, and it is transformational. I mean, both for, there's no health without mental health, but our physical and our mental health. So thank you for all you're doing, and thank you for talking today. And I hope we talk again.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining, everyone.